One really popular goal for soon-to-be retirees is to be able to live off of the dividends from their retirement accounts, from their savings accounts. It's a super powerful strategy, right? In essence, what people are hoping to be able to do is just live off of those dividends and not have to sell their stocks, let those stocks continue to grow over time, and use the stocks as a legacy tool. It's an interesting strategy. I'll put my cards on the table. It's a key part of my strategy for when my time comes to retire. So let's talk about how to make this happen and give you a feel of how big of an account do you need in order to be able to do that. So let's take a walk and talk about this. So of course it matters, you know, how much money do you think you need in retirement? What's the cash flows that you need? So just for easy math, I'm just going to throw out some numbers here. I'm going to say, let's say you need $70,000 a year in retirement. And let's say you currently do qualify for Social Security. You can use this strategy too, whether you if you're in your 50s and you want to do this, you can still do it. You'll see where I'm going with the math, and then we can pick you up there and keep going with this idea. So if you want $70,000 a year in retirement, and you do qualify for Social Security, well, it doesn't mean that the whole $70,000 has to come from dividends, right? You might have other sources of income. Let's say you get $20,000 a year from Social Security. So that takes your cash flow need down to $50,000. And then let's say you have $10,000 coming in from some other income sources. Maybe you've got a side hobby that is profitable. You've got an small Etsy business that you're profiting $10,000 a year from. Or maybe you have a rental property that after expenses and the mortgage and taxes, etc., it's cash flowing $10,000 a year. So in this case, if you needed $70,000, well, we've got $20,000 from Social Security coming in. We've got $10,000 from this hobby business or from rental properties. So you really need $40,000 from the dividend portfolio on its own. Now, for people that are thinking, okay, I'm 50 and I want to retire, let's just assume for the sake of argument here that what you need is $40,000, so we can all be on the same page and going forward with this example. So how big of an investment account do you need in order to retire, in order to get that kind of cash flows? Well, it really depends on the type of dividend stocks that you're willing to hold, right? There are companies that pay higher dividends. I would argue companies that pay higher dividends can be riskier, right? That's why they're paying a higher dividend rate, is because their cash flows are riskier. So, in general, what I look for, this is not investment advice. I encourage you to find a fee-only financial advisor that knows your situation for investment advice. But if you need $40,000 a year and you're looking for solid companies, I would say I don't want to be surprised, right? I want to know if I'm getting my dividends. There's a high likelihood that these dividends are going to continue, that the companies are going to do well. I don't want that company going out of business, because then the stock price obviously is going to tank. And the dividend payments are going to tank. So I think the types of companies that you want are going to be solid companies that have a great management team, a solid market position, strong competitive advantages. They're well run, they have strong balance sheets, and they're providing the dividend from the cash flows that are being generated from the business, which is different than what I would call financial engineering, where maybe they're constantly refinancing the company and getting debt in order to pay that dividend. I don't want my dividend payments coming because the company is issuing debt, because at some point that game ends, right? So I want solid companies with solid cash flows that are in a great position, and maybe they're sharing half of the free cash flows with their shareholders, and the other half they say, we want to hold on to this free cash flow because we have growth opportunities in the company. So we're not going to pay it all out, but we're going to pay out some of it. Those are the types of companies that I'm looking for. And how this relates to our question at hand here is, those types of companies tend to be paying out, 3% to 4, maybe 4.5%. So, you know, with our $40,000 example, guilty as charged. I gave myself an easy example here. Let's assume that this company, your portfolio of companies, dividend paying companies, pays out a 4% dividend. And that's in the ballpark of what these solid companies tend to pay out. So again, 3.5%, maybe 4.5% in dividends. So if let's just say 4%. So if you want $40,000 a year, you need to have $1 million in this dividend portfolio. And I would argue you want to have a diversified portfolio, different sectors, different industries, because you don't want a surprise in one part of the industry to derail your plans, right? And if you need $80,000 a year, well, it's just double that. It's going to be $2 million that you're going to need. So that's the general rule of thumb as far as how much money you need in order to be able to do this strategy. Then I would also say that, you know, you have to be careful, because like if you just do the S&P 500, you know, you could do a dividend strategy with the S&P 500, but it's going to pay about half of the rate that I've been talking. You know, the S&P 500 is going to be closer to 1.5 to 1.8%, depending on the current market conditions. So, you know, if let's say the S&P 500 is paying 2%, just for easy math for me. Well, in that portfolio that was paying 4% of these solid dividend companies, you only needed $1 million in order to generate the $40,000 a year. But if you were in the S&P 500, and just for easy math, if it was paying a dividend rate of 2%, it's closer to 1.7, but for easy math, 2%. With the S&P 500, you'd need a portfolio of over $2 million. Certainly at 1.7, you'd probably need like $2.5 million, but at 2%, you'd need $2 million. So you do, selection is important. I think the companies that you do invest in is important. And that's why I think it makes sense, particularly with a dividend portfolio, you know, active management. This is where I think it can really help out, because what you don't want with dividend paying stocks is you don't want surprises. Now, I do want to share with you a really nice thing about dividend paying stocks, and that is if you choose them wisely, they tend to increase the cash flows, the dividends that they pay out, at a rate faster than inflation over an investment cycle. You know, as I record this video, inflation's kind of high in the US, and no, dividends are not increasing at double the rate of what inflation is now. But over, you know, like a 10-year period, I think the dividends are going to do at least a great job of keeping up with inflation, and hopefully they'll beat inflation. So if you start off today, let's say you're 55 and you're fortunate and you get to retire early, and you've built a portfolio that's going to pay $40,000 a year. Well, in 10 years, you still want it to feel like you can buy the same stuff that you can buy today. And by having, you know, if you have a bond that's paying a fixed amount every year, it's not going to adjust for inflation. I guess you could get a floating rate bond that might. But the nice thing about dividend stocks, if you pick the right companies, they do tend to increase their dividend payment nicer at a rate better than inflation. So I mentioned earlier, this is one of my dream portfolios for retirement. It's going to be a component of my retirement. And why is that? I mentioned a couple of things that I like, you know, beating inflation over time, that I don't have to sell the stocks. It can be a nice legacy tools to the extent my wife and I decide we want to leave our kids some money, we do. It's just a question about how much. So it can be a nice tool. The other thing is dividends, qualified dividends from companies. You can look up what a qualified dividend is, but a lot of publicly traded US companies have, not all, but a lot have qualified dividends. One of the things that kick people out of being qualified dividends is if it's a foreign company. So look up what a qualified dividend is, but very tax advantaged, the cash flows from dividends. An individual can make up to $40,000 a year, and you're not going to be taxed on that money. Dividends are not taxed as ordinary income. They're a subcategory of long-term capital gains. They're taxed closer to that. So the first $40,000, this is not tax advice. I'm not an accountant. I looked this up. You should look it up as well, just make sure for your situation. But the first $40,000 for an individual gets paid to you tax-free. So the 50-year-old that's retiring on $40,000 of dividend income, if that's your only income, you know, it's mostly going to be tax-free. You still have to look into state tax rates and things like that. And then $40,000 to almost $500,000, $445,850 is going to be taxed at 15%, as opposed to ordinary income tax rates. And you know, if you're making $400,000 as ordinary income, you're going to be in a very high tax bracket. But dividends are very tax advantaged. So those are the main things that I like. I guess I'll say for my own strategy, one thing that I really like about the dividend stocks is, you've heard me talk in the past about 3 buckets. The Roth IRA bucket, which is tax me now but don't tax me later account. The taxable brokerage accounts at places like Fidelity, Schwab, and Vanguard, where you're being taxed as you go. You get a 1099 from those brokerages each year and say, this is the reportable taxable income and you got to pay tax on it. So that's tax me as I go. And then there's a tax me later account, which is the traditional 401k, the traditional IRA. I think a dividend portfolio fits very nicely in those 3 buckets for the tax me while I go strategy. Because again, the purpose of 3 buckets is to be able to control your tax rate. If all your money is in a tax deferred account, as you draw it out, let's say you need, you know, let's use the example that we had before, $40,000 a year. Well, that's all going to be taxable income for you as you take it out of a traditional IRA or traditional Roth. But if you have the 3 buckets, you could take some money out of your tax me never account, the Roth, right? That's not going to be taxed. You could take some of that money out of your tax me as I go. You've already paid tax on it. And then you can have some money come out of your taxable account. And if that money is a dividend, well, yes, they're taxing you as you go, but they're taxing you at this lower rate. So it can be super powerful. So I hope all of this made sense. Bottom line is, I think dividend portfolios are super attractive. I think as we get older, they definitely play a role for many of us. Again, not financial advice. Find a fee-only financial advisor and work with somebody. But I think as we retire and we need cash flows, they can make a lot of sense because they're taxed at that lower rate if they're qualified dividends. And then just one last thing, if you're a younger person watching this channel, the YouTube reports show me that most of my viewers are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. But if you're in your 20s or 30s, you know, a dividend portfolio may not make a lot of sense for you because you still have a lot of time. And while there's all these attractive advantages to a dividend portfolio, portfolio of dividend stocks is unlikely to appreciate at the higher rate that maybe a growth account would. So when you're younger, you have more time to make up any losses that might happen because of market volatility. So having more aggressive, more growth stocks might make sense for you. Or it might make sense to have a dividend portfolio and have those dividends come in and be able to do some fun things with your family. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please do me a favor, hit the like button. Also leave a comment. I do read the comments. I try to read all of them every day. I reply to a couple dozen at least. Hopefully I'll reply to one of yours soon. And regarding the comments, let me know if there's a topic you'd like me to talk about in the future. A lot of my video ideas come from our community, so let me know that. Let me know if there's anything I could do to improve these videos. And we're building a great community, so thank you for all of you that are taking the time to comment and giving me a thumbs up. And until next time, I'm Azul, encouraging you to take full advantage of the youth of your senior years. Remember, you're only young once. Use this time wisely.